Welcome to WrestleFolks episode number 3. My name's Thomas Green. Find me on the Twitter machine at NotThatTomGreen. Thank you so much for joining us. 3 episodes in this week. I'm joined by the great, wonderful, fantastic, lovely, beautiful, other adjectives, Steven Amiri. We'll talk about him more in a second. First, I want to let you guys know about the sponsor for this episode, the guys who made everything happen, CWF Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. They are on iPay-Per-View coming up this Saturday, March the 30th. Madness in Any Direction, the name of the show, headlined by their champion, Eric Royal, facing a young man I think you should all be very excited about if you're a wrestling fan, Chiva Kid. He's definitely a guy to look out for. You got $10, get the show. ondemand.cwf247.com is where you go to order the show. Eric Royal and Chiva Kid should be one heck of a match, worth your $10 by itself. I've gotten to see quite a few CWF Mid-Atlantic shows personally, and I'm not just saying it because they put a few dollars in my pocket, but quite the company to look out for. Again, especially Chiva Kid, who I know is going to blow up huge in the next, 3 to 6 months or so. He's got a lot of things on the horizon, it looks like. So very excited about that. But like I said, first episode, the goal of this show is to celebrate the love of wrestling, not necessarily, be cynical or be, have experts or people in the field talking about it. Celebrate how awesome it can be. Part of that, we're going to start taking what are called Wrestle Memories. Hashtag Wrestle Memory on Twitter if you want to get in on this, or send us a line on Facebook, facebook.com/WrestleFolks, or email me at WrestleFolks@gmail.com. One of those 3 ways, send your very first wrestling-related memory. The thing that maybe made you fall in love with America's Finest Art Form, other than Supermarket Sweep, of course. Got one here from Josh McGuire I wanted to bring up, because I have a very similar memory to his. Not necessarily my first one, but my first one in terms of going to the video store getting a tape. Josh writes in, "Well, memory comes to my head. My first wrestling-based memory was WrestleMania 4 when the Macho Man, Randy Savage, won the vacant WWF title in one night. WrestleMania 4 was the very first tape I ever got to rent from the video store. Very exciting times in Tom's young life. I believe I was 4 years old. We rented it so much that my mom ended up buying it because I just thought it was the best show ever. It had everyone on it. Hogan, Warrior, Andre. I had a big battle royal with Bret the Hitman Hart breaking Bad News Brown's trophy at the end. I just thought it was the best show ever. It had a tournament in it. To this day, I love tournaments because of that show, because of the memories that show put in my head. To me, that show is the perfect example of not going back and checking out these things that are so nostalgic in your head. Maybe going in with some trepidation, so to speak. Because the show is miserable. It's so long, and it's so boring. And I hated myself for ruining all the memories I had. Between that and I think Survivor Series 87, I don't know which tape I rented more. I thought it was the ultimate show, and I ruined all those memories for myself. But hopefully, Josh, you haven't ruined those memories. Again, if you want to get on this action, email WrestleFolks@gmail.com with your first wrestling-based memory. Or tweet us with the hashtag WrestleMemory. Or you can go on Facebook.com/WrestleFolks, leave a message or leave a comment. And we'll get to you on the podcast during the intro one of these weeks. Steven Amiri, the guest this week. He was the first guy I contacted with the concept, trying to get him on, because to me he's the epitome of what I wanted when I wanted to get guests for this thing. He's a hilarious fella. You can catch him. He's a Witstream aristocrat. He's found on Mashable a lot. He's the funniest guy on Twitter, in my humble opinion. He's a guy who often he will tweet something 9 times out of 10. I will then get very jealous that I did not think of it before he did, because it is wonderful and magical and such. And he's gotten me a lot of Twitter followers, too, through his retweets of mine and his shout-outs, as the kids call them. So he's an awesome dude. We had an awesome conversation. You should all be looking forward to it. So right now, listen to this song, and then wait for Steven and I to talk about Antonio Cesaro's nipples. When's the first time you watched wrestling?
The first time I watched was probably late 80s. I had an uncle that had all the old WWF action figures and the ring. And the first time I was introduced to wrestling was through those action figures, because when you're a kid, that's all you want to play with. And the ring was cool. And then I just thought they were toys. And then he explained to me that those were toys based on something that you watched on television. So we sat down and we watched wrestling. And the rest is history. I just became a fan after that. It was great.
Yeah. The genius thing about the WWF in the 80s is some stuff like that could happen because Vince McMahon Jr. was pretty much just recruiting guys that look like action figures, and then kids could find Nikolai Volkov on the shelf and be like, oh, this guy would be awesome getting his butt kicked by Sergeant Slaughter.
Yes.
Or a G.I. Joe or something. And then the next thing you know, oh, this is real? Oh, my goodness. Not real, but you get the gist.
Yeah. Wrestling fans, I think, back then were a lot less cynical than they are now. I think we were willing to suspend disbelief a lot easier than we do now. So I think that's what made wrestling so special. And nowadays, the product is tailored to a younger audience, and I think that it's just kind of cyclical as far as that goes. Like the fans that watch it now that are younger, they probably have the same mindset that we had back in the day as far as what we were willing to believe. And it's really cool to see that kind of happen again.
Absolutely, and it's genius because I've never heard someone say, "Oh, I got into wrestling when I was like 24. I was at a bar and they had it on." It's always I was 4 years old or I was little and I had the action figures or I saw some big jacked up guy on TV and I was hooked. So going towards the little kids, you might as well because that's when everyone gets hooked usually anyway.
Well, you're building your fan base at a young age, and you're also kind of putting that nostalgia there to where when they're older and they have kids of their own and they see their kid, watching wrestling, they remember that. So you're building your audience at a young age, which is what they did in the 80s. Like that's how I think wrestling's one of those things that you don't just sit down and watch. You don't just flip through the channels and say, oh, that looks interesting, I'm going to watch. Someone usually has to introduce that to you. And it just repeats itself. You're young, you get introduced to it, and then when you get older, you introduce it to someone that's young also.
It's kind of like the storytelling from hundreds of years ago. You hear about everyone going to town square and sitting around and listening to the elder speak. And it's kind of like how wrestling seems to be, where I know I'm planning on doing that with my kids. I'm hoping my wife doesn't listen to this, but I've already got like a bag full of action figures. When the kid turns 4, dumping them out and just walking out of the room for a bit.
Oh yeah, a friend of mine was telling me the other day he went to another one of our friends' house, and we're all the same age, and he told his friend told him to come up to the attic with him. So they go up into this attic, and there's this green Ninja Turtle backpack. It looks like a turtle shell. And he's like, I want you to see this. And he's like, it's a backpack. And he unzips the backpack, and there's all these old wrestling action figures just in this, which is like the perfect place to have wrestling action figures, is in a Ninja Turtle backpack. It's like the same time era of when we were fans. And there's just he said I was looking through them, and there was just all these wrestlers that I was like, I had no clue that they made an action figure out of this guy. Like, I just the people that you laughed at because you're just like, there's no way that guy is gonna get over. They were action figures for him. Like, they just made action figures for everybody.
Like, did he have the SD Jones action figure? Because it absolutely exists.
Really?
Yes, I don't know if the deal is that this is what I'm guessing the deal is, because it looks a lot like the Junkyard Dog figure, but with a Hawaiian shirt painted on it. Mm-hmm. What I'm guessing is they overproduced the JYD figures, and we're like, oh, here's the other black guy. Yeah. Let's send this out, because I believe it was Cowboy Bob Orton's figure. If you had it, it looks nothing like Bob Orton. I guess the story is that
Bret Hart, when he first came into the WWF, was brought in with a cowboy gimmick, and they produced the action figures. And then right when they produced them, he became, the Hitman. He joined the Hart Foundation and all that. And they had all these action figures they couldn't sell, so they just put Bob Orton's picture on the package. So,
that makes sense. I saw a wrestling action figure the other day, and it looked nothing like the person. There was a brief point where they had, I don't know who the distributor was, where they did like scans of the person's face, and it's just like they looked just like the wrestler. And I think they changed distributors, and now the action figures look nothing like the wrestlers at all.
Oh, they switched from Jax to Mattel, which
that's right.
You'd think Mattel would get it right, since they're like the #1 distributor in the world, because they got Barbie and all that. But yeah, like Antonio Cesaro, I saw his action figure at Walmart the other day, and it's like, it looks better than the prototype I saw on the internet, but he still looks like an 80-year-old man. Like,
it's kind of hard to make Cesaro look young as an action figure. Like, if you just looked at the action figure of Antonio Cesaro, I don't know what it looks like. I have to look at a picture, but just, you see Antonio Cesaro and you're like, oh, that's a young guy who just happens to be bald. Yeah. But if you looked at the action, you're like, what is that old? Is that like someone's dad that's a wrestler?
and like, he's also got a weird body type, because he's in amazing shape, but he's very thin.
Yeah,
and that's how big are their nipples? Actually, there are no nipples, because they are completely covered in chest hair.
Oh, nice.
Yes. And he's got like a weird like Merkin deal going on.
They took the old Scott Hall action figure and just took a bald head
and there's a Tyson Kidd that I had that looks like that kind of looks like Ellen DeGeneres if you gave her the Tyson Kidd haircut.
Nice.
And then the most accurate one I saw is from the Mattel line is Brodus Clay, but they also made him like way fatter than he is.
Well, Brodus Clay, you could just probably take like an action figure of the dad from Dinosaurs and just paint it flesh colored and stick a fedora on it, and you're done.
Yeah, pretty much. Like he's a big dude, like 350 or whatever, and they made him look like he's about 600 pounds. Like, someone at Mattel's a jerk. Yeah. Like, I remember, like, when Jax had the license, I remember, like, they had one fat guy model, and it was for Yokozuna, but they also sent it out for, like, Earthquake, who was considerably smaller, and I think King Kong Bundy, and, like, the belly was down around the knees, so it was over-exaggeratedly
fat. Like Peter Griffin, naked fat?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, like, they would paint it black for Mark Henry, and just the racism in the action figure industry is astounding.
Del Rio comes with maracas.
And the biggest ripoff in the wrestling figure industry right now is the fact that they sell Hornswoggle by himself.
Yeah, it seems like it should be half price. It's an easy joke to make, but still.
Like, they make him way smaller than he should be. Like, to scale, the figure's about 1.5 feet tall.
To be fair, if Fit Finley were around still, I'm pretty sure it would be a package deal.
Absolutely. Though Mattel did make a Finley figure, and they didn't come together. Though the Finley figure I do have, and it looks just like Susan Powder. You either went to a TNA house show recently, or you paid Jeff Hardy to show up at your house and build a steel cage?
No, I went to a house show, the TNA house show. I don't watch Impact Wrestling very much, but I do like to watch wrestling live. Like, I don't care what the promotion is. I like being in the crowd and watching a match. Like, there's just something about the energy. It's like baseball games, like anybody who never watches baseball, you could probably get them to go to a baseball game just because of the atmosphere and the energy behind it. I like wrestling, period. I don't particularly watch Impact Wrestling. It just doesn't do anything for me. But the house show was cool, man. And the one thing is, I'm from Louisiana, and that's where the house show was. And if you wanted to know, like, when 2001, when Vince bought WCW, if you wanted to know where the diehard WCW fans went, they went to Impact, because this house show was just, it was old school. It was old guys with beards and trucker hats that look like loggers and just rednecks, and they're just drinking beer and yelling at people, and that was the house show, and that was cool. I'm really happy I went, just so I could see that, because I haven't seen things like that since the WCW days when I used to go watch those live. And when they used to, I mean, one of the things that always baffles me is I remember back in the day on Nitro when, you know, a heel or the NWO, they'd be beating someone up, or someone that you didn't like won dirty. People would just chuck beer and cups and trash into the ring. That doesn't happen anymore.
And golf balls, as we learned.
But yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. Now people just boo. You know, there's no the emotion, the emotional fans, the people. I guess you could call them marks, hard marks that just really get upset about that kind of stuff, and not upset as in like, oh, I like that wrestler and it's a shame he doesn't have a bigger push or something like that. These guys actually get angry about the outcome of a match, and they just start cussing and throwing stuff. And there was this one nerdy kid, I had him pegged out as soon as I walked in. I was just like, this dude is drinking the Kool-Aid hard on Impact Wrestling, because he had this huge binder, which I guess is full of wrestling autographs. And he looked like a guy, the stereotypical, if I can not be, it just no one should take this the wrong way. He looked like he worked at GameStop. He had like bangs, like long bangs, and just like a half grown in mustache, and like a shirt that was too big for him. And every time I was ringside, and every time a wrestler would come out, he would just talk so much smack, like he was calling him out, like he was part of the show. And that was the funniest thing in the world to me. And I know, like, he did it for every wrestler. So Austin Aries came out, and Austin Aries, I like Austin Aries. I think Austin Aries is a good worker and a good talker, and I like him as a heel. And he was just giving that dude a hard time and just making fun of him. And I know I feel like after Austin Aries' match, that he went backstage and told all the other wrestlers and said, there's this one dude out there ringside that you have just got to see, because he is nuts. Because right after that, it was the cage match, Devon versus Jeff Hardy. And when Devon came out, he had a water bottle, and he just doused that kid with a water bottle. Triple H, like he raised his arms up and spit the water out. It was nuts.
That's the awesome culture of a professional wrestling show, is the crowd. It's, you know, any like pretty much any show you go to outside of, let's say, you know, Ring of Honor or something that's like internet heavy, you know, as much as if we think everyone at this point knows it's all not legit. It's, you know, it's whatever you want to call it. Every time you go to a wrestling show, you're more than likely surrounded by people who live and die by the endings of these matches. And like you said, I live in Indiana, so I have a very similar, you know, experience with live crowds in terms of people showing up who you don't think have existed in the past 30 years. And also, I don't know if how many times you've gone to, like, let's say a Hooters or something during a pay-per-view. They show up there too, and they're amazing because they have to interact with like waitresses, and you get to watch that. Like these waitresses who are not in the bubble at all have to interact with these people who only come out of their homes to watch wrestling matches on this giant screen in front of them. Like, it's incredible.
Normal pay-per-views in the comfort of my home or a friend's home, but I need, now that you've said that, I need to find a place where a bunch of drunk rednecks are watching pay-per-views around Hooters waitresses.
It's fun. Like, I would recommend doing it once a year, usually, Mania if you can get there for like a Mania or something when there's a lot of them there.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
the best. I wouldn't go every month. It does get irritating eventually.
Probably
But like,
do a Rumble. So when, a lot of the older wrestlers that we haven't seen in a while come back during the Rumble, people just lose their minds.
yes, absolutely. Something like that. Like I remember the first Triple H Undertaker Mania match a couple years ago. There was a guy that was decked out in like full Triple H like gear. Like he had the denim vest over the leather jacket and the Triple H shirt, and he looked like he was dressing up like cosplaying like Triple H, and he was going nuts. Let's go! I think it was Let's Go Hunter. I hope he wasn't chanting Let's Go Triple H because that doesn't make sense. But and then this other dude from across the bar starts chanting for Taker. They're going back and forth, and that happens a lot at wrestling now. But they slowly inch closer and closer during the match. And then as they get to, Tombstone, 1, 2, kick out, they're chest to chest. And like one of them ends up having to be taken out of the restaurant because he throws a swing. And then there's another guy that's like kind of famous here locally for going to the pay-per-views. He's big, like barrel-chested dude who sweatpants and really tight Triple H shirt. Every month he like goes by himself, and you kind of feel bad because you can tell the guy's lonely, but he's always the best person in the world. Like there was a Triple H match at one WrestleMania where he had the sledgehammer, and he swings it, and this guy goes, hit him with the titanium. And then it was the Mania. I think it was the LA Mania where they did Foley and Edge, where they did the spear through the table, with the flaming table, because there were thumbtacks in one of the matches, and the guy pulls out the bag of thumbtacks, and it's always thumbtacks. It's never anything else.
No.
And this guy is genuinely confused. What's in the bag? Could it be a snake?
Yeah.
Could it be bricks?
Yeah.
It's the best. But yeah, and you always seem to run into that guy, like you said, the guy with the binder who, like, he's there just because there's wrestling there. Oh my goodness, I get to maybe touch Kurt Angle in the shoulder a little bit, or something like that. Yeah, and you said you love going to live wrestling. Like, do you have any other like weird like fan experiences like that?
Man, I don't. None that come to mind. I mean, when I was a wrestling, like a lot, I just recently started going back to live shows because they didn't come here for so long, and there was a brief period between, I would probably say 2006 and the past couple years where I didn't watch wrestling at all. It's kind of one of those things that I thought I'd grown out of, and I've just as of the last couple of years gotten back into it. So I didn't watch when I was going to these live shows. I was just as excited. I wasn't weird about it. I didn't go as hard as those guys, but I was just as excited, and was so wrapped up in the experience. I didn't take the time out to look to see if anybody else was, acting crazy. But fans in general, I do have one. I went to the SmackDown taping. I went to a SmackDown taping back in November, and we were sitting in front of this like family that had like 3 or 4 small kids, and we're watching Cena and Sandow fight, and we're obviously chanting for Sandow because we want to make everybody upset. We knew everybody around us loved Cena, so we were going to be those guys that didn't like Cena. But there's these little kids behind us, and these little tiny kids were getting into it. They were just yelling, and the mom was getting into it too. The mom was just talking about Sandow. She's like, "What? Why you got my grandma's panties on?" Just yelling at the ring, and then her son was like, "You a big old fat walking baby." And he just like leans over to his brother and he goes, "Why won't someone tell him he's a big fat?" We're losing our minds. We stopped watching the match because that was the funniest thing in the world. And the mom was going crazy. You could tell the mom was a fan. She's like, "I got to remind myself I ain't at home." Yeah, she was comparing at home television. But that was hilarious. And we were sitting 2 rows back, and there were people that had ringside seats. And it's one of the things that always pisses me off about people that normally have ringside seats is usually they're given to them, or they're like sponsors or something like that, local sponsors. And they do not, most of the ones where I was at, they did not care about wrestling at all. Like, they were there because they were free ringside tickets, and it was just like, hey, we could do that. And we were being so loud because I'm generally reserved, but when I go to wrestling shows, I go nuts. I chant, I start chants, I yell, and these people were so upset that we were yelling. Like, they just had no they were just, you could tell they were miserable because they sat behind us or sat in front of us.
The little kids are the best to watch wrestling with. Because they haven't been, even like now, like with as much technology as we have, they're still not all the way like whatever, like most people are. Like they'll Great American Bash 2006 was in Indianapolis, and I like last second decided to go, and I was up in the horrible cheap seats, which are usually the best fan interactions because those are usually the rows of kids, because the parents, they have 87 kids, they can't afford anything more than the $10 tickets. And I was next to like a long, apparently this woman just had kids for a living because she brought like 9 kids with her. And like the husband, like they were down on the other end, and they set their youngest right next to me because apparently that's a thing to do. He's like 5 years old, and I remember Funaki came out for the dark match, and this kid goes nuts for Chusaki, and I like at the time I was kind of a jerk, and I was trying to correct him. His name's Funaki. yeah, Chusaki. And then he wrestled Simon Dean, and he kept calling Simon Dean the Fonz. And I don't know how he got that reference. I don't know if like that's all he watched at home was wrestling in Happy Days or what. But
the Henry Winkler mark.
Absolutely. And Henry Winkler, full circle, has a wrestling movie. The one and only, I think it's called. He played like Gorgeous George in it.
Like a hypnotist. That was his gimmick.
Yes.
Yeah.
But going back to this kid, like that was the same pay-per-view. They're like a bunch of guys. They didn't like fail a drug test, but they took a wellness test, and they were all found to have elevated liver enzymes, which, if you look it up, one of the main causes of it is steroid abuse. But I'm not going to touch that one. But like Bobby Lashley and the Great Khali and a number of guys were taken off of the show because they failed this test, and they didn't announce it on TV. But me being on the internet, I'm all like a total smartass, and I'm telling everyone around us, "Oh, hey, I read on the internet Bobby Lashley isn't wrestling," and everyone's getting mad. And this kid overhears me, and he's like, "Where'd you hear that from?" I'm like, "I read on the internet." He stands up, puts his hands on his hips, gets his face all red, and yells, "The internet is fake." And like he
kind of is. He's not all the way wrong.
No, absolutely not. Like, man, if that kid could be on Twitter, which I'm sure he is now. I'm sure it's 7 years ago. I'm sure he's already got 3 kids of his own.
Yeah.
But no. And then Bobby Lashley comes out and is like, "Yeah, I can't wrestle tonight." And then like they did Finley and Regal in like a heel versus heel match, and this kid just doesn't know what to do with himself. And then finally, I told him that. I made up a story like in the back, Finley hit Regal with a pipe, so he's a big jerk and he should chant for Regal. And then he got like super into Regal, and it was awesome.
So it was Finley versus Regal at Great American Bash 06?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like they were both the irony, yes.
Yeah.
Ireland, England.
Well, I'm thinking about like that probably would have been a Great American Bash match back in like '96.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It would have opened.
It was around that time period that they were feuding, because they had that awesome match with all the cars that they pretty much couldn't show on television.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, they just decided, hey, we're gonna hit each other really hard, and then Finley hurt himself. But yeah, WCW and Cars didn't have the best of luck. Like, remember that? Do you remember that junkyard match they had with like 20 dudes in it?
Yeah, it looked like the opening to old Monday Night Raw.
Yeah, where like everyone got hurt, and they didn't catch one of the injuries on camera.
No, yeah.
Yeah, like Mikey Whipwreck did like a dive off of like a pile of cars and like separated his shoulder, and it was never shown because they decided to shoot this thing live in the dark, and they didn't have any lights. So WCW, what can you do?
Yeah, I've started watching old. I stopped watching WCW around the time, like right towards the end of, when it started, like 2000, I guess. And I started going back and watching the old Nitros. I'm like, man, everybody gives that, though it sucked towards the end. And I was like, well, let me give it a shot. And I was watching the one where they strip all the titles and it's New Blood versus Billionaires Club. And Russo comes out, and you finally get to see Russo. And I thought it was pretty good, man. Like, WCW gets a bad rap, but it wasn't too bad. They could have gotten better. It's just they had too many people on the roster to keep up.
The exemplary point of too many people on the roster is like the opening segment from that show where you have everyone on the roster.
That was the part. Like, I watched that, and I was like, that many people wrestled for WCW at that time?
Because it looked like the ring was full, and then the ringside area was full, and then they had a bunch of guys on the ramp.
Yeah, and people still weren't coming out. Like, Flair showed up later, Hogan showed up later,
and to think all those people were making at least six figures.
That's nuts.
Yeah,
that's nuts to me.
And the funniest part about it is I don't know if they caught it on camera or anything, but I read about it online later. But apparently they were all supposed to look like really sad. Or like really like, oh my goodness, these guys are gonna fire us all, and all that. But if you look in the background, everyone's biting their lips, trying not to laugh, because Brian Knobbs, I guess the pyro went off and he was standing in the corner and it caught his hair on fire.
Oh my god!
So like he's running around like 330-pound man baby with this, and he had like the horrible looking. Like spiked Mark McGrath hair at that point.
Yeah, I remember he was like the hardcore champion, I think, at that time.
Yeah, he was the best hardcore champion ever just because of the match where it was him and Ming. It was on some random episode of their TV, and they were on like a balcony or something. And there's a giant Goldberg's like life-size cutout, and Ming spears it for no reason, and then does like the Goldberg thing, and then they both dive off of a balcony, never to be seen again. Until that Nitro.
Jeez.
WCW is just the best in terms of absurd crap like that.
Yeah.
But no, like, I'll tell you right now, like, if you ever get to it, the last 3 months of the company, like January, February, March of 2001, is legitimately really good. Because, like, the guys that were making all the money, I don't know if they couldn't afford to keep them, like, on TV and pay them for the dates or what. But there were, like, it would be Scott Steiner versus one of those guys. And then, like, DDP would kind of be hanging around. And then a bunch of young guys. It was, like, because I remember they started another, like, a cruiserweight tag division. And they were doing a bunch of cruiserweight tag matches. And, like that stuff's worth checking out because it's legitimately good. But, yeah, like, going back to what you were saying about, WCW not being that bad towards the end. Like, out of context, the TV is fun to watch because, A, you don't have Raw up against it, reminding you, oh, hey, this is the hottest product in the history of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
And B, you could just kind of have fun watching it because, you don't have to, like, pay for anything to watch, like, the blow-off to anything. Yeah. And plus, at any time, you could just click X and never watch it again.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I found myself in that one Nitro just kind of skipping around, because they had just matches I just didn't care about, and that was one of the biggest differences in WCW for me is when I 96, 97, you cared about the opening matches because they had wrestlers you enjoyed watching. You had the cruiserweights, you had Jericho and those guys, and Malenko, and those were matches I enjoyed watching. Like, just I was glued to the TV watching them do all these things. And then at that point, those opening matches didn't exist anymore because all those guys were in WWF.
And they tried making up for them with like guys that had been working for 6 months out of the power plant. And,
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to replicate, though. Yeah, like I said, towards the end, like the last 3 months, the cruiserweight stuff got to the point where it wasn't as good, but it was pretty darn equal. Not equal, but you pretty much get the gist. But
Well, a lot of their cruiserweights, though, I mean, I remember they had 3 count. That was the boy group, and I felt like sometimes the over the top gimmicks overshadowed their abilities in the ring because you were too focused on how ridiculous they were. You didn't get a chance to appreciate what they could do because a lot of those guys like Shane Helms and all they were phenomenal and they were great.
man, I was the biggest, most ridiculous Shane Helms mark when I was like 12. Like right when I like hit middle school was when 3 count hit. And like it was a ridiculous conflict because I wanted to like shout Shane Helms' name from the mountaintops, but then he was also doing the boy band gimmick, so I'm like, so it was kind of a conflict there.
And then Tank Abbott joined 3 count.
See, Tank Abbott was at least funny.
I liked Tank Abbott. I liked him, and what's so nuts is that they wanted him to be the world champion at some point. Like he was gonna get a huge push, and
it was the night that Benoit and them quit.
Yeah, they wanted.
Yeah, he was supposed to win like a battle royal or something.
Yep, they wanted him and Sid at some point. They thought that. I mean, I would have watched it, but it's funny considering that he just ended up was a joke. He was a big guy that probably was really scary. That was just making an ass out of himself. I loved it. I thought it was great.
Oh, Tank's the best, but you got to also think like he's a guy that also never really bothered learning how to wrestle. Like, I think he was sent to their training center, the power plant, for like 3 weeks at one point, and he just didn't go. But they're like, oh, we're paying him $300,000 a year.
That's kind of what they're doing with Tensai now. Like, Tensai was brought in as just this guy who just destroyed, and people just weren't buying it. So now they make him ridiculous, and it works. I think that at some point, if the gimmick, if it's a serious gimmick and you're trying to make that work and it's just not happening, you have to just kind of sit back and be like, okay, this isn't going to work. Let's go the other way with it. And they did. And it worked. I love Tensai now.
Oh, Tensai and Brodus are great together.
That's great. And you've actually helped Brodus because I think that was kind of dying out. You can only come out to the ring, squash, and then dance so many times before it gets old. And then by having him and Tensai together, it's gonna actually make Brodus Clay be more relevant longer.
Absolutely, and Brodus is though a weird one because it's like him and Ryback got that push around the same time, and they were pretty much doing the same thing. Only Brodus danced and was fat, and Ryback was a robot. And you notice the second Brodus lost that first match, I think it was Big Show. He lost to. He lost everything.
Yeah.
Which it's funny because again the finishes are make believe, but yet a guy loses a match and he loses so much. And going back to Tensai, like I think what hurt him is that they send him out the first night as like something a kabuki threw up and like practically a dress looking thing with the Terminator helmet, and then the same night Brock Lesnar returns. Like an hour later. Like, how am I supposed to take, the great Muta robot seriously when you got Brock Lesnar killing John Cena and looking like a destroyer of men?
It looked like they were trying to set up Tensai as being an opponent for Cena, and that just didn't happen.
No, and they even put him over Cena at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So
it looked like that was going to be a pay-per-view match, and then Lesnar came back. I think Lesnar was kind of last minute too. I think that's kind of why it got squashed.
And then that's the best part about like the Royal Rumble and the Mania weekends is, like the random guys you hear. Oh, this guy's there. Is he gonna come back? Like because that was part of the excitement about Mania last year was Saturday afternoon, Brock Lesnar was sighted in town.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's something that I think we as wrestling fans lost with, you know, the internet getting more popular, and something Rob Fee and I were talking about, you know, the death of WCW, where every week you had a guy jumping back and forth, where now it's just there's one show and you're lucky if you get a new guy once a year like that.
Yeah, I'm really a huge fan of the younger talent now. The new guys, Daniel Bryan and CM Punk. I mean, he's been there for a while, but just like the fact that they're still, you know, with WrestleMania, they're still banking on the, you know, Attitude Era guys, and because it's going to pull in those casual viewers. But I'm still just as interested in the current storylines that these guys are, you know, doing, and then the younger guys matches too. I thought a cool concept would be, and I was thinking this kind of goes back to that Nitro where, you know, you had the New Blood versus the Millionaires Club, that type thing. I thought that was an awesome angle that could have worked, but I think that angle could work now with these new guys, and then you've got these guys like Rock and Brock and Triple H and Taker that are all coming back, you know, just around Mania time. Have these new guys just get really pissed and say, you know, we're tired of, you know, you guys just coming back once a year. I mean, they kind of do it with The Rock now. That's kind of been an angle, but just have the new guys feuding with the old guys, and you're building, you know, you're building the new talent. You know, you're putting those guys over, and you're making it interesting. You're putting a little bit of emotion behind it because those guys are working their butt off all year, and you get to come back, you know, once a year and get these big payoffs. Like, I just think that taking that old Russo angle and applying it now would be a pretty good idea, because you've got a younger roster that seems to be pretty hungry, that wants to make a name for themselves. And I think it'd be a good springboard for him. Now, I'm really hoping the CM Punk Taker match is that at Mania this year.
That's an interesting one because like you said, Taker's gone, you know, the next day, and how do they do that finish? Because you got to justify Punk's got to be back on the road that, you know, that Friday. You know, he's still doing the loop, so you got to be able to figure out a way to, you know, if you're going to continue the streak, how do you do it and not have Punk look like a Punk? But you know, but the Billionaire Club's New Blood thing, the narrative was weird, because these young guys who have a legitimate gripe and who could probably get a lot of sympathy if you just let them go on TV and air their grievances.
Yep,
they were the heels.
Yeah, but and they also weren't likable. You didn't have any emotional investment in those guys. Half of those guys you didn't know who they were, so you weren't rooting for them at all. That's why it was easy for them to be heels. The guys they have in WWE now, you know, a lot of people are emotionally invested in them and their characters. So I think they would end up being, you would be torn. It would be very emotional, because you'd have people that really wanted the guys they grew up with, the older wrestlers, to win, and because that's, you know, those are the guys. And then you have a lot of the other people that would, and you could have the same person even that just really likes one of the newer guys, and you're just kind of like, man, I don't know how this is gonna go, even though you know kind of usually how it's gonna go. It makes people interested, I think.
Yeah, like it's. There's a saying in wrestling that, you know, real works, and it's kind of weird considering, again, it's a whole make-believe world, but wrestlers aren't very good actors generally. But if they're put in scenarios where it's kind of based off of something that are like the whole CM Punk thing a couple summers ago that blew up huge.
That was great.
It was all based off of stuff that was in the guy's heart.
Yeah.
So, and I guess you can like feel like when it's real like that, and then, you know, month and a half later, he's wearing Triple H's sports coat on television and being not corporate guy, but he kind of became Like if you've seen like the Muppets movie, the one with Jason Segel recently,
Yeah.
he became the Muppets version of CM Punk,
Yeah.
where he would kind of like throw out something for the internet, but then cut the same promo John Cena's cutting.
Yeah. It was weird to see him go from a guy with grievances to a guy that was just cool with it, and I don't know. It was good, but I do believe that you have to have some bit of emotion behind it. It's got to. You ever watch, like, there's certain cartoons and there's certain TV shows that kids watch, but like adults get it. Like it has to work on two levels. And I think that the storylines for WWE have to kind of work the same way. You've got to have something that keeps kids interested and adults interested, and they have to run parallel with each other.
Absolutely, like people like hardcore wrestling fans complain about, WWE doesn't, it's not the Attitude Era anymore. They label themselves TVPG and yada yada.
Yeah, you gotta let that go.
Yeah, exactly, because you can do family friendly and not be, bunny rabbits and rainbows.
Really, if you think about it, like, the Attitude Era was probably defined by three things for me: blood, tits, and language. I don't necessarily have to have those things to make wrestling enjoyable for me. And that's why usually those people that say, it's not the same anymore. You're right, it's not the same. But if you really like wrestling, if you're watching it for the right reasons, and not to be a Jerry Springer show, then you're gonna enjoy it. You're gonna enjoy wrestling, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And to be honest, we saw that a lot of these extreme things happening each week, that it kind of just became stale. So now that we don't see a lot of those things, when Brock got busted open on Raw, was it a couple weeks back?
Yeah,
that was
huge. When Triple H wet himself. Yeah.
That was big, because that's not something that happens a lot, so it was awesome.
Yeah, and like, it's also a different time period in the world. Like in 98, 99, 2000, the best you could probably hope for, like, internet-wise, 56K modem. So it was hard to find, other means of entertainment outside of television, movies, whatever. Yeah. Now, you listed, blood, tits, and language. If I want to see boobs, I can go anywhere. I can find them on my phone. If I want to see, someone getting his head blown off, I'm just going to go on, like, Reddit or something. Yeah. And I'm sure they have a subreddit for, like, death or whatever. And language, I mean, is it really that shocking to hear someone drop an F-bomb anymore?
Yeah. One of the things is, when I was a wrestling fan in middle school, and it was around the Attitude Era, I wanted to be entertained, and I was so wrapped up in the characters and the storyline, I didn't care about the wrestlers' well-being. I just wanted to see some cool stuff. Now that I'm older, I want wrestling to last longer. Like, I want this business to be around for a good while. Like, I want to show my kids this. And I think in order for that to happen, the wrestlers have to be healthy, and they have to not be injured all the time, and they have to not get in trouble. And I actually care about the business as a whole. So I don't want them to jump off the side of a Titantron, because they could get hurt. I don't want them to screw up. Like, if they do a move that I like seeing high-flying, risky moves, like any other person. But there's sometimes I'll watch a move and I'll be like, man, like, that was close. That could have ruined, him. Like, if he's got a good, pusher, he's got good momentum. I'm like, that could have ruined everything. Like, that could have put him on a shelf.
Yeah, and yeah, wrestlers are more humanized these days. I mean, I don't want to be that guy, but social media is kind of part of it. Where these guys have become, like, if I follow Dolph Ziggler on Twitter, I kind of get a look into the guy. Like, there's a whole other dimension to the guy that you never see on TV.
Great, man.
But like, and now you don't want to see him. Every time he takes one of those ridiculous bumps, it's like, I don't want to see you get hurt.
He's a heel, and and that's his thing, and that's what got him where he's at. But I'm just like, dude, you need to be a face. Like, like I think enough people like you. Like, I want him to get put in that position where he can get the fans behind it, because they're already behind him as a heel. Like, he reminds me a lot of Flair. And when him and Miz fought on that old school Raw, and Flair was with the Miz, I'm like, man, that should be the other way around. Like, I want Flair to be with Dolph, because they were just so similar about making the other guy look good. Flair was really good about, being a bad guy, but also making his opponent look good. And I just thought that was, what he needed. But Dolph has the was it the TLC match when he was with Cena, and it was a ladder match. The fans were losing their minds over Ziggler.
It felt like a star being born. Like, those fans, that finish where AJ shoved Cena off the ladder.
Everybody lost it.
Yeah, like, you felt like, oh, this guy just got made as a star in the industry, and 2 weeks later he's losing to Cena every week, and now he's losing to the Miz. I guess he lost to Alberto Del Rio last night on SmackDown.
Yeah,
which as people listen, it'll be like 3 weeks, but yeah, sorry, time stamping and such.
Yeah, I just felt but it seemed like one of those things. I wanted the next night on Raw for him to cash in. Like, let's just do it. Let's just go ahead and get this done, and start building him. And it just didn't happen. Like, I'm not a fan of I wanted the AJ Dolph thing to be more like the McMahon Helmsley era type thing, where it was just them. I like Big E Langston. He's a third wheel, and it kind of sours it.
It is. I do agree with that. Big E should be with someone. I don't know if Dolph is the right guy, but Big E needs a straight guy, because, again, anyone who follows that dude on Twitter knows he is hilarious. And I think that the second they let him open his mouth for more than 20 seconds, he's gonna get over. Like, he's gonna get almost. I would compare to, like, almost Rikishi over. And here's this funny guy who's also gigantic and can kill everybody.
Well, yeah, he's been on the mic, and I just feel like there should have been a build up to him actually talking. Like, I kind of like the way they did with Kane. Kane talking was a huge deal. I think with Big E, it should have been the same thing. Like, just him, just deadpan, straight face, and then you realize this dude is hilarious. You have this idea of who he is, and then he just throws you a curveball when he speaks. I thought that could have been done a lot better.
A lot of things with Big E could have been done better, because he's an amazing looking human being. I would, like, within 3 weeks of him showing up, he was like losing tugs of war to John Cena, like the Dolph Ziggler cage match. They did like a tug of war over the briefcase. And stuff.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have let that guy lose anything strength wise for like 3 years.
Yeah,
he would be Zeus. He would be the guy that John Cena could not figure out.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking as far as Big E, just silent, powerful guy that you just didn't really know where he was at.
Yeah,
it adds a little bit of psychology to his gimmick.
Yeah, like going back to Kane is the most interesting character, because it's like he gets all the stuff that the Undertaker says no to. It seems like, oh, hey Taker, how about you do this deal where you kill somebody in a car accident, and then maybe you want to have, nope, I don't want to do that. Kane, will you do that? Yes, I will absolutely do that.
Yeah, I liked the Kane Daniel Bryan back and forth. It's kind of gotten old with me now. I want them to split up. But when they first got together, I thought that was great. The anger management stuff, that really was funny, and I think the kids just ate it up.
And it humanizes Kane in a way that he needed, because Kane coming back every year as the superhuman monster kind of gets old after a while. Mm-hmm. And whereas there are legs to be had with a guy that looks like that doing straight-laced comedy.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say that like the anger management skits they did were some of the funniest, like legitimately funniest stuff that company's done in a long time. Because I don't know if you'll agree with me, but generally pro wrestling comedy, especially heavily written like that, is not funny outside of like pro wrestling, if that makes sense. Like it's generally not very naturally funny.
Yeah.
But like, and another guy who's I think the world up in terms of his comedic timing right now is Brad Maddox.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
If anybody's ever watched when he was in NXT or FCW, I guess, he was basically the same character, and he had like a YouTube show that was like horribly edited, and it was really funny. It's the Brad Maddox Show.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
But it's really funny, and he's really, really good.
Like he's a guy that he's one of the few guys on a wrestling show that I could see doing stuff outside of wrestling and just fitting in. Like I could see them, someday if he makes his money or whatever, decides I just want to act. He could probably go and do that and be very good at it.
Yeah.
And going back to the Brad Maddox thing, just a side note, have you seen the movie that he made? Like they showed trailers for it during the Brad Maddox show. It's called The Referee.
Yeah.
Have you seen Brad apparently put up the full movie on YouTube.
I have not seen that.
I will send you the link. It is fantastic. Dean Ambrose plays a homeless guy, and and Alex Kozlov plays like 3 different roles, and it's fantastic. But yeah, like he was again to date this podcast, he was on SmackDown last night doing commentary, and just his comedy isn't forced. Like I remember there was one point where I think Damian Sandow said something like, "Is everyone in this company incompetent?" And you hear someone faintly in the background saying, "Nope." And there's silence. And then and I'm pretty sure like Vince or somebody in his headset was like, "Yeah, you probably shouldn't be talking right now." And he just ignores them. But he's excellent at being, and he's so hateable too. Like, he's got that face you want to punch.
Oh,
and that's the best quality you can have in a heel. It's just the guy who can stand there and
like a funny Bischoff.
The weirdest thing is he looks more like Eric Bischoff's kid than Eric Bischoff's kid.
Yeah, he does.
Like Eric Bischoff's kid looks like Lorenzo Lamas's kid or something. And I got to see Brad Maddox pre WWE, like even pre NXT, because he was originally trained out of OVW, and at the time I was living like 2 hours from OVW, and I have friends down in Louisville. We would go to like OVW house shows, and you would not be able to guess this guy had a tenth of the natural charisma he does. He was very much old school, long hair, come on baby face.
Yeah,
and now he's fantastic. Who else are you digging these days? You're saying like Daniel Bryan and Punk, and like out of the current crew, who else are you into right now?
I like Daniel Bryan. I like Cesaro. I like Sandow. Damian Sandow, man, he's great. It's nuts to think he's wrestled as long as he has, and that he's just now kind of finding his place, because he's been with that. I've seen old matches where he was on Heat and he didn't have a beard and he was clean shaven and he looked weird.
He had long greasy hair, and he's just Joe indie wrestler.
Yep. And just kind of, you'd see him in the background of things, like he was an extra that they would pull up from development just for a scene. And to see him and Cody Rhodes together were great. But Sandow's gimmick of that, just the intellectual, is awesome. I enjoy it. I think it builds heat well, and he's great in the ring. Like there's just, and if you're a guy like me who kind of takes a step back from the gimmick, you can kind of tell like this dude has a pretty good sense of humor about himself, because you pick up on little certain things that he does that probably that's just something he thinks is funny, and he does it kind of like Brad Maddox. So Damien Sandow is one of my favorites to watch right now.
And Sandow's one of those, that small percentage of guys who is a good like actor. Like you could pluck him into a sitcom and he would be funny doing Damien Sandow, because you can tell that guy has committed himself to the role. Like I would imagine riding around with that guy in a car, if he's not Damien Sandow 24/7, then he's at least throwing out Damien Sandow stuff all the time.
Oh yeah. You can tell he's put work into it.
Yeah. And then you saying that about like Cesaro and Sandow, those are kind of like almost 80s characters. Like there's one note in that. Oh, you could put in the guy and go, hey, that's the Swiss guy. Hey, that's the intellectual snob or whatever. But that's kind of how wrestling works at its like best, is when you have the this guy versus the that guy, and you can just sit down one day, not know what's going on, and be able to tell, oh, this is why there's a conflict, because that guy's really smart and he's snobby about it, and he thinks that guy doesn't, that guy's Joe Everyman. Yep. Okay, I can get into that guy. Cool. That's wrestling at its best.
It kind of reminds me a lot of Rick Rude, in that Rick Rude was a very good heel because he was arrogant about how he looked and his physique, and those times are they're not you can't pull that off as well anymore. I think now more it's about what you know. Wrestling fans have gotten smarter. So and along probably back then, you would be upset when a guy was very arrogant and stuff like that about his physique, and that worked. Now we all, just in general, day-to-day stuff, we don't like a know-it-all. We don't like a guy who corrects us. We don't like the guy who chimes in and goes, actually, it's this. And Damien Sandow is kind of like the Rick Rude of that. Like he flaunts how much more intelligent he is than his audience, and he gets a lot of heat for that, and it works.
And also, he's not afraid to be hated, which a lot of guys seem to be for the longest time after the Attitude Era. Because you had the NWO, who were the heels, but they also loved it when you cheered them.
Oh yeah.
Or you had the guys who were technically heels, but they were kind of baby faces too. So it was kind of, that conflict wasn't as strong then. And I mean, I guess you can't argue it, because they made the most, WWF made the most money they've ever made during that time period. But it's nice to see them going back to, again, that is a bad person, that is a good person. I want to see them fight.
Yep. And with Sandow, it's just one of those things where this isn't going to last forever. That it's going to eventually become stale, and they're going to have to do something different with him. And he's one of those guys that I'm really excited about going to the other side, like becoming a person that people like seeing. Because right now people boo him, and he's cool with that. But eventually it's just going to run its course. And seeing him have to do something different, a different facet from, just a different side from Damien Sandow, starting to see him turn that curve is going to be exciting.
And going back to something you had said earlier about how, we have, as people, have gotten smarter. That seems to be how wrestling has gone in terms of, good guys and bad guys, baby faces and heels, is the fans are turning guys these days. Like WrestleMania last year, Daniel Bryan was a heel, but the fans didn't like the fact that they only get 18 seconds of him, because those fans, in general, if you're going to WrestleMania, you're a hardcore fan, because you're spending hundreds of dollars on seats on top of everything else. Yeah. So they know Daniel Bryan is an amazing performer. They didn't like what they did, and so they pretty much took over Raw the next night. Yeah. And Daniel Bryan kind of had to be a babyface eventually out of that, which he's in a weird place right now. Like, him and Kane are pretty much wrestling everybody. So they're baby faces, but they're also wrestling baby faces. It's weird.
With Daniel Bryan, though, it was very hard. It's very hard when you can have the audience participate with you to be a bad guy. If the audience, like when he does the yes/no chants, that's audience participation, and it's very hard to get heat that way. Like it really that those chants make him more popular, so he had to go that other way. And even though he's saying no when they're saying yes, the fans are still cheering for him and they're happy to see him. I mean, and you don't really view him as a heel anymore.
Yeah, and like that goes all the way back to like The Rock. You know, The Rock having catchphrases.
Yeah.
And then having to turn babyface back in like 98.
That's exactly what it is.
Which was always great because Rock would then have that like resentment for when they did the opposite when he first came in as a babyface and they turned him heel. And I like his promos like around the time he turned where he was calling the fans monkey crap and they would cheer. Were always fun and entertaining.
Oh yeah.
But I think we're about to the end of the hour, so we're gonna wrap things up.
Sure.
Thank you so much again for coming on. It's been a lot of fun. We really
no problem.
Really need to do this again. Maybe like we mentioned off air, us two and Rob Fee together would be awesome. You can find you on Twitter, obviously, at Steven Amiri. Steven with the V version and then Amiri. Anything else you want to throw out?
Not really, man. Not much going on.
Well, then, if that's the case, then once again, thank you very much, and we're going to wrap it up from here.
All right, thanks for having me.
That's it for WrestleFolks episode 3. I want to thank Steven Amiri so much. He will definitely be back for a part 2, most likely with Rob Fee from episode 1, together on the line, talking wrestling. That should be coming up here in a few weeks or so. Next week, Chris Sims, jumping from the world of comedy to the world of comic books. Big fan of wrestling. We talk a lot about a lot of amazing things. You should look forward to that conversation. And before we go, new episode of Joe Gagney's Funtime Pro Wrestling Arcade, which you can find at youtube.com/Mike and Tom Present. I work on that. I edit. I do some of the social media. Sometimes I fly around in a circle. New episodes currently up on the YouTube channel. Find me on Twitter at NotThatTomGreen. Find the show on Twitter at WrestleFolks. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/WrestleFolks. Subscribe on iTunes, leave a review, 5-star review, leave a rating, listen to us on Stitcher Radio. Do everything you have to do to support the show because I demand that you do. Find all of our archives 2 episodes back, again on iTunes. Find us on there, WrestleFolks: the podcast. We'll see you next week. We won't see you, you'll hear us. But find us anyway.